Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today. Usually when people think about, ancient prophecy, they picture dusty scrolls, maybe some desert caves, and very vague mystical predictions.
Right. Things that could mean anything.
Exactly. But today we're looking at a text that feels like it was written about next week's stock market crash. We're putting a pin in the map on the coast of modern-day Lebanon, but we are traveling back about 2,700 years to a city that was essentially the Wall Street, the Silicon Valley, and maybe New York of the ancient world all rolled into one.
It's a place that really defined the concept of too big to fail long, long before we ever coined that phrase in 2008.
We are talking about Tyre, and the text we're unpacking is Isaiah chapter 23. From the King James Version, the burden of Tyre. Now, I have to be honest, when I first looked at this chapter, I saw a list of, ancient geography, Tarshish, Chittim, Zidon, and some pretty heavy doom and gloom poetry. It felt distant.
A bit inaccessible at first glance.
For sure. But once you peel back the layers and once we started digging into the historical cross-references, this became a fascinating piece of historical detective work.
It really is. It stops being just a poem and becomes more like a forensic analysis of a global economic collapse. It's about the rise, the absolute destruction, and then the very strange, almost baffling restoration of this maritime superpower.
And our mission today is to decode that entire timeline. We want to understand why a prophecy about an ancient harbor city can explain the fragility of our own modern global economics. We really want to look at the spiritual danger of pride, specifically the pride that comes from wealth.
That's part of it.
And ultimately, we want to get to the surprise ending of this chapter because it completely flips the script on how we view money and God.
That ending is crucial. It takes what looks like a straightforward tragedy and turns it into a really complex lesson on stewardship and redemption in a way.
So, just to set the table for everyone listening, here is our stack of sources. We are, of course, analyzing the text of Isaiah 23, verse by verse. We are cross-referencing this with prophecies in Ezekiel and those mystery Babylon passages in the book of Revelation.
You can't understand one without the other, really.
And because we can't ignore the history books, we are pulling in the records regarding Nebuchadnezzar and Alexander the Great to see how these things actually played out on the ground centuries later.
And that historical context is just non-negotiable here.
Yeah.
You cannot understand the precision of Isaiah's words without seeing how these military campaigns unfolded. It's just stunning.
Exactly. So let's set the tone. The title itself is The Burden of Tyre. Now, that word burden, it isn't just a fancy way of saying chapter or message.
No, not at all. In the prophetic books, a burden, the Hebrew word is masa, it signifies a heavy, weighty message of judgment. It's something the prophet has to carry. It's heavy to receive and it's heavy to deliver.
And for Tyre, this was the heaviest news imaginable. I mean, this was the center of their world. It was the hub of luxury, of commerce, of perceived invincibility. It was the place where the money never stopped flowing and, the party never ended.
And until it did, in a very big way.
Let's jump right into section 1, the crash. Isaiah opens with a scene of absolute panic. Verse 1. Howl, ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Chittim it is revealed to them.
Wow, what an opening.
Okay, let's unpack the geography first to really get the emotion here. Who are these ships of Tarshish? Where is that?
So to understand the panic, you have to understand the distance. Tarshish is widely believed by most scholars to be Tartessus, which was a port city located in southern Spain.
Spain. So in the context of the ancient Near East, that is the absolute end of the line.
It's the edge of the known world for them. It was the Wild West. It was a region incredibly rich in metals. We're talking silver, tin, iron, lead. So when the text speaks of the ships of Tarshish, it isn't talking about little local fishing boats bobbing around the coast.
These are the big ones.
These are the long-haul supertankers of antiquity. They were massive, ocean-going vessels designed for long, high-risk, but very high-reward voyages.
So these sailors, the crews on these ships, they have been gone for a long, long time.
Months, possibly even years, depending on the trip. They're out at sea, completely disconnected from the news cycle. There's no Twitter, no satellite phone, nothing. They are sailing home, probably dreaming of their return, with hulls just packed full of precious cargo. They're expecting to return to the bustling metropolis of Tyre, cash in, and live like kings.
But on their way back, they make a pit stop. The text says at Chittim.
Chittim is the ancient Hebrew name for Cyprus. It's a large island about 100 miles, maybe a bit more, off the coast of Tyre. It's the final Logical refueling stop before you hit the mainland. It's where you get the latest news, the market rates.
So imagine the scene. These captains pull their ships into the harbor in Cyprus. Maybe they're shouting to the dock workers, expecting to hear the latest gossip or what the price of silver is.
And instead, they get the report that changes everything. It is laid waste. The home port is gone.
The text says, no house, no entering in. That sounds like more than just damage. It sounds like total infrastructure collapse.
That's a great way to put it. It implies the harbor itself is gone. The warehouses are rubble. The banks are destroyed. There is literally no entering in. Imagine you're a pilot flying a cargo plane full of new iPhones to New York City, and while you're over the Atlantic, you get a radio message that JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, they're all just gone. The city's a crater.
That isn't just a tragedy. That is an economic singularity. The value of their cargo, all that tin and silver they risk their lives for, effectively drops to zero in that moment.
Instantly. Because the market to sell it to has vanished. The entire financial ecosystem that gave their cargo value has just evaporated.
And that is why the text commands them to howl. It's not just be sad. It's a visceral, gut-level cry of animal despair.
Their whole world, their future, their retirement, it's all gone. And they found out 100 miles from home.
And verses 2 and 3, they broaden this picture of shock. It says, "Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, thou whom the merchants of Zidon that pass over the sea have replenished." And then it mentions the source of their wealth, the seed of Sihor and the harvest of the river.
Okay, a couple of key players there. Sidon, or Zidon, was the mother city, about 25 miles north of Tyre. Tyre started as a Sidonian colony, but eventually grew to become much more powerful than its parent. The daughter surpassed the mother.
And Sihor, I dug into this. That refers to the Nile, right? The river of Egypt.
Yes, specifically the black or muddy waters of the Nile Delta, rich with silt. This single detail highlights the genius and the fatal flaw of Tyre's entire economy. You see, Tyre was largely an island fortress. They didn't have vast tracts of farmland. They couldn't grow enough food to feed their massive population.
They were totally dependent on imports.
Completely. Egypt was the breadbasket of the ancient world. Tyre was the distribution network. They took the harvest of the river, the Egyptian grain, and they shipped it to the rest of the known world. They were the ultimate middlemen.
The mart of nations, as the text says in verse 3.
Right. Think about that term, a mart, a market. They didn't produce the raw material, but they controlled the flow. In modern terms, think of them as the logistics giants, like a combination of, say, the Port of Singapore and a global commodities exchange, like the Chicago Mercantile.
So they facilitated all the trade. And being a middleman is incredibly lucrative. You get a cut of everything that passes through your hands.
The most lucrative a position to be in. But it also makes you incredibly vulnerable. If your supply chain breaks, you starve.
Right. And if Tyre falls, the grain rots on the docks in Egypt because there's no one to ship it. And the nations in, say, Greece or Anatolia that rely on that grain go hungry. It's a system of global interdependence.
And Isaiah is painting a picture of a world economy that is highly efficient. But my goodness, is it brittle? One key node goes down and the whole network collapses.
The command here is to be still. It's the opposite of the howling sailors. It's like the silence of a trading floor after the closing bell on a crash day. Yeah. Just stunned silent.
The buzzing marketplace is silenced. The merchants have nothing to say. There are no deals to be made.
Verse 4 then takes this poetic turn that I think is really poignant. It personifies the sea itself. It says, "Be thou ashamed, O Zidon, for the sea hath spoken, saying, I travail not, nor bring forth children, neither do I nourish up young men, nor bring up virgins."
It's a haunting metaphor, isn't it? The sea is speaking as a barren mother. For centuries, the Mediterranean had been teeming with Phoenician ships. The sea had birthed colonies, sailors, merchants, and explorers. The waters were alive with the children of Tyre and Sidon.
And now?
Now, with Tyre destroyed, the sea is empty. It's quiet. It is saying, it's as if I never had children. I don't give birth anymore. The hustle and bustle, the shouting of sailors, the snapping of sails, it's all gone. The life has literally been sucked out of the ocean.
It's like a reversal of creation in a way. The waters are no longer bringing forth life.
That's a powerful way to see it. It's decreation. The engine of maritime life has been shut off.
And the reaction to this spreads in verse 5. As at the report concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained at the report of Tyre. Is this referencing the plagues of the Exodus? What's the connection to Egypt?
It could be. It could be a reference to the most terrifying event in their collected memory, the fall of Egypt during the Exodus. Or it could be referencing more recent events, like the Assyrian invasions of Egypt. The point is, The collapse of Egypt was a world-shaking event.
The fall of a superpower.
Exactly. And Isaiah is saying the fall of Tyre, a commercial power, will cause just as much global agony. The nations are terrified. If Egypt, the breadbasket, can be shaken, and if Tyre, the bank vault, can be broken, then nobody is safe. It's a domino effect.
When the hub falls, the pain is universal. It really is a picture of a global crash. When the center collapses, the shockwaves hit everyone, no matter how far away they are.
And that leads us directly into the next section, the refugees and the reason, the consequences.
Verses 6 through 9 describe the fallout, and verse 6 is just tragic irony. It says, "Pass ye over to Tarshish, howl ye inhabitants of the isle."
Think about that command for a second. Pass over to Tarshish. Tarshish was their colony. It was their resource mine at the end of the world. The Tyrians were the masters, the colonizers, the ones who set the prices.
And now?
Now Isaiah tells them they have to flee to their own colony as refugees. The masters have to go beg for shelter in the houses of their servants. The CEO has to go ask for a room in the factory worker's house. It's a total reversal of fortune.
Utter humiliation. And verse 7 just twists the knife even further. "Is this your joyous city whose antiquity is of ancient days?" Tyre prided itself on being old, didn't it?
Extremely old. The Greek historian Herodotus, who's usually pretty reliable, visited Tyre and was told that the Temple of Hercules there was founded around 2750 BC.
Wow. So by the time Isaiah is writing this around 700 BC, Tyre has already stood for 2,000 years.
2,000 years. Think about that. To the people of that day, Tyre felt eternal. It had always been there. It was like London or Rome to us. The idea that it could simply end was unthinkable.
It's that end of history illusion, isn't it? We feel that way about our current systems. We can't really imagine a world without the New York Stock Exchange or the internet. It just feels fixed.
Exactly. And Isaiah punctures that illusion. He says, "Her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn." And you have to note that detail. Her own feet.
They aren't being carried in royal litters or sailing in their luxury yachts anymore.
No. The honorables of the earth are walking. They are refugees on the road, carrying what little they can on their backs. It is the ultimate picture of humiliation. The joyous city is now a city of weeping exiles.
This all leads up to the big detective question in verse 8. Isaiah asks, "Who hath taken this counsel against Tyre?" And he describes Tyre in a way that really stands out to me. He calls it the crowning city. And he says her merchants are princes and her traffickers are the honorable of the earth.
This is the vital social commentary of the chapter. We really need to pause on this phrase, merchants are princes. In the ancient world, typically you were a prince because your father was a king. It was all about bloodline.
Right.
Or you were a warlord because you had the biggest army.
Right. Status was inherited or taken by force.
But Tyre changed the game. Tyre invented something new. They created a meritocracy of money.
A commercial aristocracy.
Precisely. If you could navigate to trade routes, if you could corner the market on tin, if you could close the deal, you gained status equal to royalty. You became a prince. Your wealth, not your blood, conferred honor upon you. It sounds very, very familiar, doesn't it?
It sounds exactly like today.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really care about bloodlines anymore. We care about the Forbes list. We look at billionaires as our modern princes and princesses. We hang on their every tweet. We consider them the honorable of the earth.
And Tyre was the crowning city. That can mean it was beautiful, like a crown jewel, but it can also mean she was the one who gave out crowns. She established colonial rulers. She propped up kings in her client states. She was a kingmaker, all based on economic power.
So Isaiah is identifying the birth of this new world order run by money. And he asks the big question, who decided to take this down? Was it a rival nation? A political plot?
And verse 9 gives the verdict. It is the theological bombshell of the chapter. It wasn't the Assyrians, really. It wasn't the Babylonians, ultimately. The Lord of hosts hath purposed it.
And the motive is laid bare.
Yes. This is the core reason. To stain the pride of all glory and to bring into contempt all the honorables of the earth.
To stain the pride. That is such a specific and aggressive target.
It is. God isn't against commerce. He isn't against ships or trading grain. He is against the pride that comes from it. The Hebrew word for stain there means to pollute, to desecrate, to profane. God intends to take the very thing they glorify, their self-made status, their economic invincibility, their glory, and treat it as something common, something dirty.
Because they believed they were self-sufficient. They thought their system was foolproof.
That's at the root of the sin. It's the arrogance that says, we built this, we are untouchable, we are the gods of the sea. As we'll see in Ezekiel, the king of Tyre literally says, I am a god. This self-sufficiency of wealth is a spiritual narcotic. It makes you feel safe when you are not safe.
So God targets that specific type of arrogance to show them the reality of their dependence on him.
He brings the honorable of the earth into contempt. He shows the world that the honor they created for themselves is worthless in the face of his purpose.
So the verdict is in, guilty of pride. The sentence is destruction. And in section 3, verses 10 through 14, we see exactly how that sentence is carried out. Verse 10 has this interesting river image. Pass through thy land as a river, O daughter of Tarshish. There is no more strength.
This is a bit of a tricky verse to translate, but the word for strength there is actually girdle or belt in the original Hebrew. A belt holds things together. It provides restraint and support.
Okay, so Tyre was the belt that held the colonial empire together.
Exactly. She controlled the trade rates, the flow of goods, the political appointments. She was the restraining force. Now the Tyre is broken. That restraint, that girdle is gone.
So the colonies, the daughter of Tarshish, are free to just flow like a river.
Precisely. The colonies are no longer under the thumb of the mother city. They can overflow their banks, go their own way. It suggests the complete collapse of the imperial order. The carefully managed system dissolves into chaos, or perhaps a newfound freedom for them.
It's the unraveling of empire. And then it says there's no escape. Verse 12, oppressed virgin, daughter of Zidon, arise, pass over to Chittim, there also shalt thou have no rest.
The judgment is inescapable. Even if they flee to Cyprus, to Chittim, the prophecy says, there also shalt thou have no rest. The long arm of judgment carried out by these empires will follow them. There is no safe harbor when God's purpose is in motion.
And then verse 13 identifies the instrument of this destruction. And this is where the history buffs usually perk up because it gets a little complicated, but very specific. It says, behold, the land of the Chaldeans. This people was not till the Assyrian founded it for them that dwell in the wilderness.
This is stunningly precise prophecy. The Chaldeans are the Babylonians. Now you have to remember the timeline. In Isaiah's day, around 700 BC, Babylon was not the regional superpower. Assyria was the big bad wolf on the block. Babylon was a vassal state, often rebellious, but ultimately under Assyria's boot.
Isaiah calls them, this people was not. They were essentially nobodies on the world stage at that moment.
Exactly. They were a minor player. So Isaiah is predicting that this currently insignificant people, the Chaldeans, are going to be the ones raised up to ruin the untouchable Tyre.
It would be like predicting in 1990 that a small online bookstore called Amazon would eventually bring the retail giants of the world to their knees.
That's a perfect analogy. It seemed impossible at the time. But God says, I am going to raise up this people who was not to bring down this great stronghold. And historically, we know this is exactly what happened.
Which brings us to the deep dive detail on the sieges. Because taking Tyre wasn't easy. It wasn't a one-and-done deal.
No, it was a military nightmare for conquerors. The first major fulfillment of this prophecy came with Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, a Chaldean. He marched on Tyre around 586 BC, right after he destroyed Jerusalem.
But Tyre had a unique geographical advantage.
It did. There was Old Tyre, which was on the mainland coast, and then there was New Tyre, the real seat of power, the fortress, built on an island about half a mile offshore.
A literal fortress in the sea.
Right. So Nebuchadnezzar comes in with his massive land army. He destroys the mainland city with relative ease. He flattens it. But the Tyrians, with their superior navy, just retreat to the island. They ferry their wealth, their supplies, their people over, and they basically taunt him from their walls.
Come and get us.
Exactly. And Nebuchadnezzar couldn't. He didn't have a navy that could compete, so he laid siege for 13 years. Can you imagine that? 13 years of his army staring at an island they can't touch.
That's an incredible testament to Tyre's strength, but also to Nebuchadnezzar's stubbornness.
Eventually, a kind of compromise was reached, and Tyre submitted to Babylonian rule in name, but the island itself was never conquered by him. The mainland city, however, was left in ruins.
But the prophecy in Isaiah says, laid waste and no entering in. And Ezekiel's prophecy against Tyre is even more specific. It seems like there has to be more to the story than just Nebuchadnezzar, because the island fortress survived him.
And that is where the second act of the drama comes in. And it's one of the most incredible stories in military history. Fast forward about 250 years to 332 BC. Enter Alexander the Great.
The man who never saw a wall he couldn't breach.
Alexander arrives at Tyre. He needs their fleet to conquer the rest of the Persian Empire. The Tyrians refuse to submit. They trust in their island walls, just like they did with Nebuchadnezzar. They think they're safe.
But Alexander is different.
Alexander is different. He looks at the half-mile gap of water, not as a barrier, but as an inconvenience. And he decides, If I can't sail to the island, I will make the mainland walk to the island.
He improvises on a colossal scale.
He builds a causeway, a massive land bridge straight through the sea. And this is the mind-blowing fulfillment of the parallel prophecy in Ezekiel 26, which says of Tyre, "They shall lay thy stones and thy timber and thy dust in the midst of the water."
Wait, say that again? Stones and timber and dust?
Yes. Alexander ordered his men to take the rubble, the stones, the timber, and even the very dust of the old mainland city, the ruins Nebuchadnezzar had left behind, and throw all of it into the sea to build his bridge.
He literally scraped the dust off the old city to build his weapon against the new one.
He scraped the mainland bedrock clean. He built a road out of the ruins of the past, marched his army across it, used his siege towers, and breached the impregnable island fortress. He destroyed it completely. The city was burned, tens of thousands were killed or enslaved.
So the laid waste prophecy of Isaiah and the scraping her clean prophecy of Ezekiel were fulfilled to the absolute letter.
To the letter. It just took 2 different empires and nearly 3 centuries to complete the picture. It shows that God's word often plays the long game. What looks like a partial fulfillment in one era becomes a total fulfillment in the next.
That is just staggering to think about. So the crash happens, the pride is stained, the city is destroyed. But then the text takes this really weird turn in section 4. We get to verse 15 and we see this phrase. "And it shall come to pass in that day that Tyre shall be forgotten 70 years, according to the days of one king."
Right. And after the destruction, there's this period of being forgotten. This 70 years is widely interpreted by scholars to correspond to the duration of the Babylonian Empire. Jeremiah, a contemporary of Isaiah, also prophesied that Babylon's dominance would last for 70 years.
So during that time, Tyre was suppressed. It was a vassal state. It wasn't the glorious independent queen of the sea anymore.
Exactly. It was forgotten in the sense that its global dominance was put on pause. It was no longer a prince among nations. After Babylon fell to Persia under Cyrus the Great, Tyre was allowed to slowly rebuild and regain some of its commercial prominence.
And when that time is up, verse 16 gives us this command. And it uses a metaphor that, it makes everyone a little uncomfortable. It says, "Take an harp, go about the city, thou harlot that hast been forgotten. Make sweet melodies, sing many songs, that thou mayest be remembered."
Yes, the harlot metaphor. We need to be careful here to understand it culturally and theologically, and not just be shocked by the language. In the Bible, prostitution, or harlotry, is very often used as a metaphor for spiritual unfaithfulness, for idolatry. Israel is called a harlot when she chases after other gods.
But here, in the context of Tyre, it seems to be about something else.
It is. It refers to commercial promiscuity.
Commercial promiscuity. Break that down for us.
Think about the nature of a harlot in the ancient mindset. Her relationships are purely transactional. She doesn't have a covenant. She doesn't have a husband she's faithful to. She has clients. There's no loyalty, only exchange for profit.
So Tyre is a harlot because she will trade with anyone. She has no allegiances.
Exactly. Tyre has no allies based on shared values or brotherhood. She has customers. She sells her goods and her services to the highest bidder. She doesn't care about your morals, your gods, or your politics. If your money is good, she is open for business. It is pure, unadulterated, pragmatic capitalism. Profit over principle.
So when it says she should sing a sweet melody to be remembered,
that's marketing. That's advertising. Think about it. Tyre has been forgotten for 70 years. The world has moved on. New trade routes have been established. How does she get her market share back? She has to put on a show.
She has to seduce the nations back into trading with her.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Come buy our famous purple dye. Come buy our cedar from Lebanon. She has to make herself attractive again. She puts on a performance. She sings the song of consumerism so that she can be remembered by the global marketplace.
And verse 17 says it works. "And it shall come to pass after the end of 70 years that the Lord will visit Tyre, and she shall turn to her hire and shall commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth."
Right. And the Lord visiting Tyre here means he allows her to rise again. He permits her restoration. And what does she do with this second chance? She goes right back to her hire, her wages, and commits fornication, global trade with everyone.
So restoration here does not mean repentance.
Not at all. Tyre doesn't get saved. She doesn't have a change of heart. She goes right back to doing exactly what she did before, making money the old-fashioned way, serving mammon.
Which makes verse 18 the biggest plot twist in the entire chapter. Honestly, I had to read this 3 or 4 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. It says, "And her merchandise and her hire," so her prostitute wages, "shall be holiness to the Lord."
It's a stunning reversal.
A complete shock.
It continues. "It shall not be treasured nor laid up, for her merchandise shall be for them that dwell before the Lord, to eat sufficiently and for durable clothing."
To understand how radical this is, you have to know the law of Moses. In Deuteronomy 23:18, it is explicitly forbidden to bring the hire of a harlot into the house of the Lord as an offering. It was considered an abomination. You couldn't tithe with dirty money. But here, Isaiah says this harlot money, the profits of this promiscuous global trade, will become holiness to the Lord. How is that possible?
Isaiah sees a future where the wealth generated by this secular, commercial, frankly, harlot system is consecrated. It's repurposed for God's kingdom. God essentially hijacks the profits. The key is in the next phrase. The wealth is not treasured or laid up by Tyre to build her own pride anymore.
So it's not being hoarded.
Exactly. It's not feeding her arrogance. Instead, it flows through Tyre to them that dwell before the Lord.
And who are them that dwell before the Lord?
In the Old Testament context, that would primarily refer to the priests and Levites who ministered in the temple. In a broader sense, it means God's faithful people.
Do we ever see this happen historically, or is this just a beautiful symbolic idea?
No, we see amazing glimmers of it. Think about the time of Ezra and Nehemiah after the Babylonian exile. When the Jews came back to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, they were a poor, struggling community. They didn't have the resources. Who supplied the cedar and the skilled labor for the construction?
The Tyrians and Sidonians.
The book of Ezra, chapter 3, says so explicitly. They were paid, of course, but their resources, the fruit of their trade, went directly into building the house of God. The hire of the harlot was literally building the temple.
And there's a New Testament connection too, isn't there?
A very strong and personal one. In Acts chapter 21, the Apostle Paul is on his final journey to Jerusalem, knowing he's heading into danger. His ship docks at where else? Tyre. And the text says he finds a church there, a group of disciples, and he stays with them for 7 days.
So Christianity had reached Tyre.
Yes, and the text implies they cared for him, they supported him, they warned him not to go to Jerusalem. It's quite literally the wealth of Tyre, the commerce that allowed that port to exist and those believers to live there, was feeding and clothing the Apostle Paul and supporting the spread of the gospel.
To eat sufficiently and for durable clothing, it literally happened to the greatest missionary in history.
It did. And it teaches us this profound lesson about wealth. Money itself is morally neutral. It's the heart and the purpose that matter. God is capable of taking resources generated by a secular, even a corrupt system, and repurposing them, sanctifying them for his glory.
That ties perfectly into section 5, where we look at the typology and the spiritual warfare behind all this, because you really can't read Isaiah 23 without hearing these massive echoes of the end times.
They are twin chapters in many ways. If you read Revelation 18, which describes the fall of Mystery Babylon the Great in the last days, the language is, well, it's almost lifted directly from Isaiah 23 and Ezekiel's prophecies against Tyre.
The weeping merchants.
The weeping merchants, yes. The shipmaster standing afar off, watching the smoke of her burning. The cry that, in 1 hour, so great riches has come to naught. The lament over the loss of luxury goods. Isaiah 23 is the blueprint. Tyre is the type. It represents the world system, specifically the economic dimension of it.
So when we see Tyre in the Old Testament, we're looking at a prototype of the end times global economy.
That's the argument, yes. A system built on luxury, on merchants as princes, on global interconnectedness and trade. But a system that is fundamentally proud and independent of God. And just like Tyre, the prophecy says Mystery Babylon falls suddenly, catastrophically, and the world goes into economic shock.
Now, we also have to talk about the king of Tyre mentioned in Ezekiel 28, because Isaiah talks about the human princes, but Ezekiel gets very specific about the spiritual power that's actually behind the throne.
This is a crucial cross-reference for the unseen, behind-the-scenes aspect of this whole story. Ezekiel 28 starts by addressing the prince of Tyre, that's the human ruler, likely a king named Ithobal II. He's full of pride, saying, "I am a god."
But then the language shifts.
It shifts dramatically. Midway through the chapter, the address changes from the prince to the king of Tyre, and the description goes way, way beyond any human being. It says, "Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God."
No human king was ever in Eden.
None. It calls him the anointed cherub that covereth. It says he was created perfect in beauty until iniquity was found in him. He walked on the holy mountain of God.
That sounds like Lucifer. It sounds like a description of Satan before his fall from heaven.
That's how most theologians have understood it for centuries. And what's absolutely fascinating is how this being, this king of Tyre, is described as having fallen. Ezekiel 28 verse 16 says, "By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned."
By the multitude of thy merchandise, by your trade.
Yes. The Hebrew word implies trafficking, trade, going back and forth with goods. The fall of this mighty spiritual being is directly linked to a form of trafficking. It implies that the spiritual power behind the city of Tyre, the spirit of unchecked commerce, of accumulating more and more to make oneself a god, is the very spirit of Satan himself. It's the spirit of mammon.
Wow, that adds a whole new layer to God's purpose, to stain the pride of all glory. He's not just humbling a city, he is warring against a spiritual stronghold.
Absolutely. The title, the Lord of Hosts, is military language, the Lord of Armies. He is strategically dismantling the earthly fortress of a spiritual entity that dares to claim, "I am a god, I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seas."
So, Section 6. Let's bring this right down to where we live today. Why does a prophecy about a nearly 3,000-year-old city matter to someone listening to this deep dive in their car or at the gym?
Because in so many ways we live in Tyre. We are citizens of the global Tyre.
Okay, let's unpack that. That's a big statement.
Well, just look at the parallels. First, we have the mart of nations. That's globalization, plain and simple. We rely on ships of Tarshish, our complex global supply chains, to bring us everything from our iPhones assembled in China to our coffee beans from Colombia.
And we saw during the pandemic what happens when those ships stop or even just slow down. The world howled about toilet paper and computer chips. We realized how fragile we are.
Exactly. We live in an incredibly efficient, interconnected, but very brittle system. Second, the merchants as princes.
This is our culture to a T. We don't build statues of generals or philosophers anymore. We celebrate the CEOs, the tech founders, the hedge fund managers. We track their net worth like a scoreboard of human value.
We equate financial success with honor. They are the honorable of the earth. And Isaiah gives us this stark warning. God is committed to humbling that specific type of arrogance. He has a history of doing it.
And harlotry of consumerism, that really hit me when we were discussing it. The idea of the harlot singing a sweet melody to be remembered.
It's the algorithm. It's the targeted ad. It's the constant stream of marketing that sings a sweet song to us 24/7. You need this. This will make you happy. This will give you status. This will fix your life. Buy, buy, buy. It seduces us into a transactional relationship with the world where we are defined by what we consume.
But there is real encouragement here, too. We can't end on that note. Verse 18. The hope.
Yes, the sanctification of wealth. This is the positive takeaway for the believer. We don't have to run away from the economy. We don't have to go live in a cave. But we have to fundamentally change the destination of the wealth that passes through our hands.
It says the merchandise is for them that dwell before the Lord, to eat sufficiently, and for durable clothing. It sounds so practical.
It's incredibly practical. It's not for hoarding. It's not for treasuring up to build your own little fortress of pride. It's for the practical provision for God's work and God's people. If you are in the marketplace, if you're a merchant, if you're an accountant, a programmer, a plumber, your labor can be holiness to the Lord if the fruit of it is used to support the kingdom, to feed the hungry, to clothe the saints, to fund the mission.
It's the difference between stewardship and ownership. Tyre thought they owned it. The remnant in Tyre and believers today realize they are just managers of God's resources.
Precisely. And that is the difference between the harlot and the holy. One hoards for pride and self-glorification. The other distributes for God's purpose and God's glory.
This has been a massive deep dive. So to wrap this all up in our outro, what is the one big takeaway here?
I think if you remember one thing, it's this. No economy, no company, no country is too big to fail in God's eyes. Tyre was the invincible city, the eternal city. And Ezekiel tells us it became a bare rock where fishermen spread their nets.
So for the non-believer who might be listening, what's the takeaway for them?
It's a loving warning. If your security, your identity, your hope for the future is in your 401k, in the stock market, in your career status, those are all ships of Tarshish. And as history shows, ships can sink. Don't build your house on the harbor that can be wiped away in a day.
And for the believer.
It's a call to dwell before the Lord. That phrase from verse 18 is so important. The wealth is for those who dwell before the Lord. That is your position. Not dwelling in the market, not dwelling on the news headlines, but dwelling in his presence. And from that place, trusting that God acts behind the scenes of history. Recessions, crashes, booms. He is using it all to stain pride, and believe it or not, to ultimately fund his eternal purposes.
I love that. It takes the fear out of the headlines. It reminds us that there is a sovereign hand guiding the chaos we see every day.
It really does. It's a message of ultimate security in him, not in the system.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. The text talks about the wealthy refugees fleeing to Chittim or Tarshish, looking for rest but finding none. If the ships of Tarshish in your life, your investments, your job, the economy as a whole sank tomorrow, where would your rest be? Would you be running to Chittim, frantically trying to find a new earthly harbor? Or would you be dwelling before the Lord, knowing that your real supply, your real security, comes from a source that never, ever dries up?
That is the question to answer before the storm comes.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We will see you next time.